Hey guys, how are you? Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto, attorney in the law in the state of Michigan, as I used to always say. And thank you guys for joining me on a beautiful, sunny Sunday afternoon. I just ran 18 miles and it was windy out there, and the wind was a bear, as we say. Paul is checking the United Kingdom and not the University of Kentucky. Just goofing around. And JP says he's getting back into mountain biking because of the United Kingdom and not the University of Kentucky. Just goofing around. And JP says he's getting back into mountain biking because of me, and I appreciate that. I've got a Haro. It's a full suspension Haro. It's got disc brakes, and I ride it almost every single day, which is how I justify how much money it costs me. So, Drone Videos checking in from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I like the international feel that this show is having already. So, and Ron from upstate New York. By the way, some people had to point out I was mispronouncing a bunch of names from New York. I always say Albany when it's Albany. And Schoharie is how you pronounce it, apparently, instead of Schoharie. I wasn't sure. I was reading that limo story from a tragic story from New York. But as always, my faithful listeners and viewers checked in with the pronunciations. So downhill for life. Hey, Steve. Hey, how are you? And Romeoville, Illinois. Hey, Minneapolis is cold. You guys got snow yet? I heard you guys have got snow headed your way. Question is whether you've got it yet and how much. So, hi from Wisconsin, Cody from Iowa, and somebody from Columbus, Ohio. See, we can still be friends, you and I, from Columbus, Ohio, for a little bit longer. But as football season wears on, there's a period within which we have to kind of limit ourselves, not get too crazy there. So. Hello from Texas. Hey, there's a funny football game there you guys had in Texas the other day. Was it in Texas or Oklahoma, where they basically called a penalty on every single player on both sides, and it made national news? That's pretty funny. So, Taylor, Michigan. Yeah, I've been there a few times. Been to court there many times. I have to admit that's pretty much the only reason I've been to Taylor. So, Rockford, Michigan. Good old rock and roll, Rockford, Michigan. Gotta like that. And checking in from Colorado, Wayne. Hey, Wayne, thanks a lot, Wayne. You know, Colorado's a beautiful place. I've only been there a couple times. My friend Timothy Masters lives there. Sent to me by my fans, by my viewers in Colorado, from the people at the Outfitters who sent me beautiful Boulder Outfitters shirts, and then, of course, people who sent me Colorado University stuff. I love the school stuff. Whenever people send it to me, I wear it. So I don't care if I've ever been there or not. I'm a fan of all education. I'm a big booster of education. So. Do you think Lou Graham will ever claim to be a sovereign citizen, or will he always claim to be a foreigner? You know, and the ironic thing, of course, is that Foreigner had some Americans in the band, but they also had some foreigners in the band. But of course, that's not what band names necessarily mean. All I can tell you is one of the funniest stories that any disc jockey who was on the radio in the 80s and 90s will tell you is there's that song, I Want to Know What Love Is. That was a huge chart hit for Foreigner. And there was a time when people would call into American Top 40 with Casey Kasem and request that song for anything. It didn't matter how inappropriate the occasion was. They'd go, well, I want to hear what that song is. And almost always, you know, you'd hear, you know, Casey with his long distance dedication. They'd say, you know, our poodle Muffles got run over by a steamroller and our family's been saddened. Can you please play I Want to Know What Love Is? So I don't know why, but it's one of my favorite stories about that song and how ubiquitous it was at one point in time. Alaska here, my insurance will settle a lawsuit if I decide to fight it instead and lose. I'm on the hook for losing in court. That's a problem in many states. I don't know about Alaska in particular, but in Michigan, for instance, if you sue your insurance company for not paying you and you win, they're forced to pay you. And of course, whatever your legal fees were come out of your pocket. So in many states, they say, yeah, you can sue them if you want to, but it's going to cost you. And it actually disincentivizes insurance companies from wanting to pay you. It's one of the biggest pet peeves of mine. I've screamed and yelled about this on this channel for years. So I'm a big believer that states should have what they call insurance bad faith claims, where an insurance company denies a claim for the wrong reason. You should be allowed to sue them and force them to pay your attorney fees if you win. So hello from Elginak down there on the water. Yeah, gotta love anybody who's on the waterway that takes you from, in essence, Lake Superior out to the Atlantic Ocean. and that's along the way. And greetings from Mississippi, which of course is the other waterway, referring to the river, of course, not the state. But it's my daughter's 18th birthday. Can you play I Want to Know What Love Is? There you go. That's appropriate. Why not? Another funny thing, and every disc jockey you ever meet will tell you this, that there are certain songs that there'll be some person in the audience doesn't understand. You go and buy a song. And when I worked playing oldies in Flint at WTRX, there's one guy who called every Saturday night and asked me to play Nights in White Satin by the Moody Blues. I have no idea why. And I wanted to say, dude, buy it. Like, or I'll buy it and give it to you. Please, just stop calling me. But sometimes, you're just happy to get a phone call. So what happened to the I Sue People for Fun shirt? Greg, good question. It's in my collection. I've got over 100 t-shirts in my other room. By the way, this is the latest edition, the Lehto's Law shirt. Just had these made. And I've got the I Sue People for Fun shirt, and I wear it from time to time. It's in my rotation, so I wore it a week or two ago. I forgot which video it was. But there's no rhyme or reason to which shirts I wear. Occasionally I get lucky. If I'm talking about dogs, I'll wear the copper dog shirt or something. But generally speaking, my shirts have nothing to do with what I'm talking about in the videos. But the I Sue People for Fun shirt is something I wear from time to time. And it's one of those things, I said it in a video in jest because somebody had threatened me with legal action. I said, I don't care. I sue people for fun. So I had a shirt made, and so I wear it from time to time. If you're a lawyer, by the way, in the audience, and you actually would wear such a shirt, send me an email and I'll hook you up. I got a couple left. I gave a bunch to my lawyer friends who thought it was funny. So Ronald Simmons points out the prevailing party should always get attorney fees, which keeps everyone focused on being right instead of giving grief. And Ronald, that's an interesting point, which you've made several times. But the prevailing party paying the fees, despite the alliteration, is what we call the English rule. And in America, we generally follow the American rule, which says that each party bears its own costs. And there are pros and cons to both sides of that argument. And, I don't have a terrible inkling about it one way or the other, except that, I work with what I've got. So I'm a lawyer. I can tell you that I wish some laws might change, but if they don't change, I'm not the guy who writes the laws. I'm just a law-talking guy. So there you go, Simpsons reference. Hello from a place I'm scared to pronounce because it says Fukuoka, Kyushu, which I know is Japan, but I don't want to mispronounce the first part there and somehow get dinged by YouTube for saying bad words. How do you feel about the Jodi Arias possibly getting a new trial? I haven't been following that one much at all. I know it was one of those Nancy Grace type murder trials where it got a lot of people all fired up for a little while, but I not followed that one, so I apologize. Steve, how you doing? Lindenwood, New Jersey. Lindenwold? I could be saying it wrong. Miami versus Washington on national TV. Is that legal? We could go off into a whole sports thing here. Hey, Steve, my father's a retired attorney. I love listening to your YouTube. I'd love to give him a shirt of yours. Darth, send me an email, steve@lehtoslaw.com. Just remind me that we had this discussion. I'll forget it 5 minutes from now. Short-term memory issues. Steve@lehtoslaw, LEHTOS, just like that, LEHTOSLAW.com, steve@lehtoslaw.com, and I'll talk to you about that. I'm here from Phoenix, Arizona, but now in Harrison, Michigan, and I'm freezing. John, Harrison's up here towards the middle of Michigan. We in Michigan always do this for the maps. And it is chilly here today, although quite frankly, it's partly cloudy outside. I went for a run this morning. I ran 18 miles. I was supposed to run 20, but I cut it short because there's just a heavy wind. And running into the wind, although Marcel made it look like fun, is actually a drain on your energy reserve. So I made it 18 miles, but I'm running the Detroit Free Press Marathon a week from today. Steve, are you laughing about Sparty's loss to Wisconsin, Johnny Knoxville? Of course I am, but I can't laugh too hard because they beat Michigan too. So Michigan is just doing this fingernail thing where they're just clinging. They're just clinging to victories. And I fear for what's going to happen to them. They're going to play Penn State next week. And then, of course, they got to play Ohio State at the end of the season. So, I'm a big Michigan supporter. I didn't go there, but I've always rooted for them. I went to Oakland University, which did not have a football team, and I don't think they still do to this day. So I'm allowed to adopt one from around the state. That's my thinking. Hello from Sacramento. How you doing up there in California? Thanks for getting up early in the morning for checking it out. So the Kia Hyundai class action engine fire settlement was pre-approved by both parties on Friday. My brother has a 2017 Hyundai Sonata 1.5 years ago. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that class action. So if you've ever got one of those vehicles that may or may not be in a class action, generally speaking, they'll let you know. But you can usually go online now and just simply run the phrase, Kia class action, or whatever year it is, or the Ford Focus or Fiesta class action. You'll find the websites, but just be careful, because once in a while, once a lawsuit gets launched like that, there'll be these copycat lawsuits. And with the class action on the Ford transmission dual clutches, there were some other law firms that popped up with some legal actions that weren't quite the same kind of action. But you got to be careful, but do some research. You'll figure this stuff out. But again, you'll probably get a coupon for a couple $100 off your next Kia. And they'll give you the coupon. It'll be on fire as they hand it to you. Steve, I love running, but have a broken foot. Have you ever had any running injuries? Good luck in your marathon. Sarah, thanks for the note. I've been lucky. I've had very, very few running-related things. Whenever I run a marathon, I do get the blisters normally and things like that, but I have never had any major injuries from running. I've been injured mountain biking, and I've talked about that before, but that's a crashing operator error issue. But I've been lucky with respect to injuries. I run real slow, which is mainly how I avoid injuries. If I ran harder and faster, I'd probably get more injuries. So I tell myself, this is how I live my best life. I run a lot, I bike a lot, and I run slowly and I bike safely. So that's it. Was that a sub 2 hour marathon setup? Nomad Dan is talking about the 2 hour marathon that was run yesterday or day before yesterday. And the cool thing about it was that there are people now who are running 201s and 202s regularly. And that in a laboratory condition, they could run one in 2 hours or under, but it would require everything to be perfect. So they went to Vienna and they found a course. They blocked it off, and they had one runner with a bunch of pacers, and he went out, and the pacers kept him at the correct pace. And when those pacers got tired, they pulled him out, put in new pacers, and the guy managed to run in 1:59. And so it is humanly possible, but they are not saying that is a world record for the marathon, because it wasn't an actual marathon. It was, like I said, laboratory settings, but it was absolutely remarkable. I mean, there's no question that the man who did that is a running phenom. He's dominant in marathons, and I believe Eliud Kipchoge, I believe, although I could be wrong on that. I'm having a mental block on my Kenyan and Ethiopian runner names, but I love watching the guys who do the best top level of that sport. I like to tell people who aren't familiar with running, they say, well, how hard is it to run a marathon? Well, running 26 miles is difficult for somebody like me who's not, a professional runner. But these guys who run the 2 hour, like 202, 203 marathons, if you were on a bicycle, you'd have a hard time keeping up with them. That's how fast they're running. So keep that in mind. Diana, hello, Steve Lehto and all in chat. Am I too late? I hope you're not ending. No, Diana, we pushed it back 1 hour today, specifically because I knew I was running a longer distance this morning, and also because I'm experimenting with the time. So today we started at 2 o'clock. We're 15 minutes in. We'll be here for at least 45 more minutes. Born to Run, VW and Tiny, calling out, I guess, a Bruce Springsteen song. And those were the days. Mikiness Analog, I can bike 20K easy. Are you talking about 20 kilometers, 12 miles? Or are you talking about 20 kilometers an hour? So good evening from the UK, East Coast, Dars Hughes. Where on the East Coast? Is there a town name we could affiliate with that? John Doe says, we need shirts. We need shirts. Well, we all need shirts. That's what people have been sending me shirts. Like I said, I've got over 100 in the other room. I've actually got a rack. I got a rack that I put my shirts on, and I filled it, so I had to buy a second rack to put my shirts on. And then when both racks got full and I realized I wasn't cycling through them as quickly as I'd like to, I actually pulled out a bunch of them that have been on camera a few times and retired them temporarily. And now I've got 2 racks, but they're both full again. So hi from Montana. Thanks for checking in. I love Montana. Never been there, but of course, I've heard about it. I've been through the Dakotas. And of course, as a reference to the Hunt from Red October, I've always wanted to go to Montana. Ross, the boss from North Carolina. I love the Carolinas. I've been to both North and South Carolina. I've been down there a couple times doing research on my winged car books. I wrote the book about the Dodge Daytonas and the Plymouth Superbirds. And I've been to Level Cross, North Carolina to interview Richard Petty. Heck of a nice guy. I've been to Charlotte and Hickory. I've been to a race at Hickory, for instance. And I've traveled through North Carolina so many times that people said, to me, Steve, if you couldn't live in Michigan, where would you live? And I've lived in Florida. I've lived in California. I've been around the country, all over the place. If I was forced to live someplace other than Michigan, I think I'd choose North Carolina. But that's just based on my, the type of talk we have on a place like this. But, if I actually had to move, I might do more research and discover I'm wrong. So the Dupree says, I'm next to Charlotte and Hickory. Have you been to a race at the Hickory Motor Speedway, though? Because that's the birthplace of NASCAR. Or at least that's what they call it. John Lynn, Scrum, are you a rugby fan? A little bit. I just like the word because it describes something so well. I don't know what you'd call it in football, where just a bunch of people are just scrumming. So, what's this about, Francis? If you knew the answer to that, I guess you'd be sitting here. For those of you who don't know, I'm an attorney in Michigan. And I've written about a dozen books, primarily about cars and history. And I've written a lot for Jalopnik and roadandtrack.com. And I had a talk show and radio for years called Lehto's Law. And I started doing videos on YouTube a couple of years ago. And I've got a channel now. And so we just decided once a week I'd sit down and just do a live feed and just kind of answer questions. Karen Tollefson said, it's my birthday, please sing. Nothing would empty this chat faster than if I sang. But happy birthday, my friend. I'm glad you decided to spend, if nothing else, a few moments of your joyous occasion with us right now. By the way, we're at 240 people in the room, which I appreciate. Last week, we peaked at 420, which I assume is just a coincidental number. Previously, on one of the experiments, we got to 500. A little later in the afternoon on a Sunday, but we're at 240 right now, so I appreciate that. And other people, by the way, throwing video, wishing Karen Tollefson a happy birthday. And if you are so inclined, you may do so as well. So how do you get away with not paying federal taxes? I hear people doing it. Wildman, you just get away with it, but not for long. And you can ask Wesley Snipes about that if you like. There are a lot of people out there, sovereign citizen types, who will tell you that, you don't need to pay federal taxes. There's no law that says you need to pay federal taxes. And there is. And if you violate it, you go to prison, federal prison. And people go to prison all the time for it. So what happens in a country of 300 some odd million people is that there be somebody out there who goes, just stop paying taxes. And if they don't catch you, but when they do catch you, they throw the book at you to teach you a lesson. And like I said, if you don't believe me, ask Wesley Snipes. Johnny Knoxville says, Steve, you need the canoe in Wisconsin. I've driven my canoe through Wisconsin, but didn't put it in the water there. I was driving to Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I'm exploring Michigan right now, one river at a time in my motorized canoe. And for those of you who don't know this, I took it out about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, on the Tequamanon River in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and did 5 miles upstream and 5 miles back, and I filmed it, and I put the film up here. Just says Tequamanon River in the fall. Little 15, 20-minute video. So you want to see what the Michigan woods look like in the fall from a canoe on a very cold day. Check that video out. It's someplace in the feed below. Steve, you should use YouTube's premiering notification 30 minutes before you go live. Mike the mechanic, and not Mike and the mechanics, but Mike the mechanic. Mike, I'll make a note of that because up until you said it right now, I didn't know it existed. I'm learning this one tweak at a time. And by the way, I did dial my microphone input level down a skosh So if anybody could tell me, if you listened to last week, how the sound last week compared to this week. In other words, am I over-modulating today or not? So, hey, Steve, as a car-based lawyer, what would be your money, no object dream car as a daily driver? Does it have to be dependable or just something cool? Because I personally would love to have like a Dodge Daytona or a Plymouth Superbird, but I don't know about daily driving it. That'd probably be a nightmare because of the nose cone and the wing and make it impractical. I mentioned before I might go for a Dodge Viper, So, Steve, why don't you have any mods for the live stream? I actually do have somebody babysitting the stream right now. So, the Pre say you're still too loud and my mic is too hot. You know what's scary about that? Maybe I should lean back a little bit, but I feel so far away now. The microphone's got a slider on it, which I've now slid almost to zero. So, John, if you're ever to the Kalamazoo River, I'll cruise with you. Is the Kalamazoo River navigable by a boat with a motor? If so, I'll have to check that one out. I've had my canoe on the St. Joseph River over there. I should do a video on gun laws here in North Carolina. It's open carry. Yeah, one of the reasons I don't talk about gun laws so much on my show, I've done it once or twice, is that the laws vary so wildly from state to state. There are states out there where they say, look, you can carry a gun everywhere you want. In fact, when you're born, we'll give you a gun to your birth certificate. There's other states where they're like, no. It's, so unfortunately, it's too difficult to get into that patchwork of laws and say, well, in some states this, in the other states that. So 6 Star says I need a new mic. It's not the mic. It's still operator error. There's something in my setup here. As you may guess, although I guess it's not visible on camera, but directly in front of me, I'm sitting here, is the microphone I use for my podcasts, my videos. But I'm not using it right now because running that into the computer to do the live thing, I don't have the technology for it just yet. So right now I'm using a specific webcam with a built-in mic dialed down as far as I can get it, and still it's overmodulating. So how is California able to open a Republic of California embassy in Russia and it's not treason? I suspect that they do that because California, although they call themselves a Republic of California, they actually are a state. Doesn't matter what you call yourself. And I suspect if any state wanted to open an embassy in another country, they could do so, with the understanding that they're not actually doing diplomacy, because obviously only the federal government can do diplomacy. But will the federal government ever legalize marijuana? I'm sure they will. The question, of course, is whether it'll happen in our lifetime or not, because the idea, the public perception of marijuana has changed so dramatically. I've mentioned before that I'm in my 50s, and so people my age and older remember when there was a time that marijuana was treated like a hard drug. Oh, by the way, Jay Paul, on the bookcase, my camera's off a tiny little bit, but I didn't have time to adjust, so don't worry. The bookcase is level. We're not. But there was a time when marijuana was treated like a hard drug. Like oh my gosh, the neighbor's boy, he's hooked on marijuana. And it's swung now to the point where you get busted with a joint, they might write you a ticket if you're in a state where it's illegal. And as it's becoming more and more common and accepted, but there's still this hardcore group of people, and I hate to say it, but it's people from my generation and up, age-wise, who just can't let go of the fact that marijuana probably isn't that big of a deal. And I think that if you were asked and said, someone said, Steve, which is worse? Which causes more problems? Alcohol or marijuana? I'd go alcohol. I just, that's based on 28 years in the legal system. So, I've handled a lot of alcohol-related problems and a couple marijuana-related ones. And the alcohol ones almost always either involve much more harm or more potential for harm. So, high-profile SCOTUS docket review. Yeah, I don't like to get into the SCOTUS cases, the Supreme Court of the United States cases, until they actually render decisions. I hate to speculate on what they're going to do. And to me, talking about what they're going to do, it's kind of like, let's just wait till they do it and then talk about it then. I remember all of the hand-wringing that happened when Obamacare went before the Supreme Court a few years back. And I remember having discussions with people who were lawyers and people who were not lawyers. And what's funny is that many of the people I discussed this with who were lawyers, we actually predicted the outcome and we got it right. And I remember talking to a few of my friends who were not lawyers and saying, it's probably going to get upheld, and we explained why. And that's crazy. That's crazy. And the Supreme Court comes out with a ruling that was right what we were saying it was going to be, and right on what we're going to say, what we're saying it was going to be. And I had people going, that's crazy. How'd you, it's like, well, lawyers do tend to think a little differently, and the Supreme Court is filled with lawyers. So, MT Cowboy, interesting analogy, Steve. However, they said the same thing about opioid painkillers. Yeah, opioids are a whole different thing. And that's one of the strange things to look at in our society, is how marijuana was always a excuse the pun, grassroots thing, right? I mean, there were no big companies, no big pharmaceutical companies pushing marijuana, but opioids were being manufactured by and being pushed by large corporations. And so they entered the legal system, they entered our society at a different angle. And it's causing all kinds of really weird problems. And I feel sorry for anybody who, and I've read about this and seen a lot about this, but anybody who was prescribed painkillers legitimately, especially people who are prescribed it by doctors, said, don't worry, it's not habit forming. And it turns out it is, so that's a real serious problem. Yeah, John, grassroots just popped in my head. We're going to tell you. That's how my mind works. Insalm, hi, Steve. How you doing? Glad to see you're here. Alex Rosenbaum, 5-4 decision. Stop bragging. I'm not bragging. The thing about the Supreme Court, we've always had 9 justices on it. And we've always had the potentials for 5-4s, and we've had quite a few of them. And that's one of those things that really, really is disturbing, I think. And it becomes painfully aware to law students when you're going to law school, when you actually read a case that ends up at the Supreme Court, and you'll see a trial court, a district court, federal district court have a trial, and a judge will make a ruling. And they'll issue an opinion that reads really, really well. So you read the opinion, you go, well, that makes sense. Then it goes to the Court of Appeals, and they reverse it. And they write an opinion that reads really, really well. And you go, wait, no, that does make sense. Especially if it's a topic you don't care about, okay? Topics we care about, the other side's insane. But here you're going, okay, that one makes complete sense. And you realize, now I've seen both sides of this. Then it goes to the Supreme Court of the United States, and on a 5-4 opinion, it gets spun around and reversed again. And you can find that not only did they reverse it, but that the Supreme Court found the same way the trial court did, but for a completely different reason. And here's where it gets funny. You read the dissent by the 4 in the minority, and you read their dissent, and you go, wait, that makes complete sense too. And that's when you realize that at the Supreme Court level, if not earlier, most of these decisions, or many of these decisions, are in fact just political. They're just political. And so that's just a sad observation about the legal system. And like I said, it occurs to most law students, and anybody who's read many court cases, and most people haven't read that many court cases until they actually do go to law school. So, should Supreme Court justices have term limits? Tommy asks. That's a good question, but I don't think so. And I just say that if you look at the Constitution, they purposely staggered a bunch of things. So the House of Representatives are in for 2 years. The senators are in for 6 years. The president is in for 4 years, and judges are in for life. And so by staggering these things like that, it guarantees that you're always going to have this possible of a reshuffling and a resetting, so that no one party will ever take over for a huge length of time, and it's not part of the checks and balances in the true sense of the meaning, but it is a way of just making sure these things do kind of adjust over time. And one of the reasons that I'm not too crazy about term limits for Supreme Court judges is that I personally like the idea that judges are appointed for life. And you want a judge to be non-political. Okay, you don't want a judge to look at this and go, oh, I got to worry about re-election next week. Here's how I'm going to rule. And that happens in states where there are judges who get elected for terms. And in Michigan, for instance, we've got circuit court judges, district court judges, appellate court judges, and Supreme Court judges who are all up for election every so often. And they might have a longer term, like 6 or 7 years. But the problem is that they are up for election. And they don't run partisan. They don't say, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican. But they run ads that look like it. So you can tell who's who. And the idea that you've got to cater to an audience that you're going to then rule on, I think, lends itself to trouble. So I like the lifetime appointment for judges, but typical, like anything else, it has its drawbacks. And so there you go. Are your live chats available later as recorded, Prentice? Yes, they are. The moment this is over, I will hit a button and save it, and it will simply become a video that you can find on my page. Just go to my main channel page, and it'll be listed as one of the videos. There you do. So I now have 331 people in the room, by the way. So we're getting up there. Silk Dog, do you trade stocks? No, I don't. No, I don't. And I'll tell you right now, if you read many books on economics and our economic system, I've read a whole bunch. I love Michael Lewis, for instance, who wrote Liar's Poker, and a few other very, very good books about our economy. You discover that the idea that you or I could study stocks and figure out which ones to buy and somehow beat the other people, and then you discover this insider trading, and there's people doing this micro trading where they own stocks for a fraction of a second. We can't compete with that. So there's nothing wrong with taking your money and buying stocks and parking it there if you think you bought a stock that's going to return a good investment. But the idea of speculating or day trading in stocks to me is like, just as rather go to the casinos in Detroit and toss the money on the table and have some fun with it and see what happens. Steve, I've stopped watching football since the Lions are not playing. John, and what's funny is I usually joke about the Lions because the Lions are a horrible, horrible football team, usually from Detroit. And the owners are the Ford family. And the families own them for years and spends as little money as they possibly can because people in Detroit will go see them. They can lose every game in a year and people still go see them. So why invest any money getting a better team? And so my understanding is they're doing a little better this year. That's good. But I'm one of these people where unless they start treating their fans with a little more respect, I refuse to support the team other than just make fun of them from time to time. I'm a Detroit Tigers fan. You'll occasionally see me wear the Old English D shirt that says Detroit Tigers on it. And I'm also a Red Wings fan. I love the Red Wings. But the Detroit Tigers have better management. And I mentioned before, I was at Game 5 of the 1984 World Series. I was there when Kirk Gibson hit the home run off Goose Gossage. I was sitting in the bleachers and had a great time, a lot of great memories from that time. And I've always been a Tigers fan. So as a little kid, I played Little League Baseball and listened to the Tigers. People in Detroit would know Ernie Harwell, for instance. So, I love the Tigers, and it's a fond memory for me. So, Lions versus Packers tomorrow night. Yeah, Monday Night Football. Could be a big deal for the national audience. Let's see what happens. I hope they don't embarrass us. Scott Murphy, no pro sports, done. Well, sorry, I hope you don't mean done with this. Hi, Steve, fish and chips. I like it when one of my favorite meals checks in. I love fish and chips. I've actually been to England a couple times. I actually had fish and chips there too, although it's very similar to the fish and chips we have here. So, go Tigers 84. I was just being born. Yeah, it's a long time ago. I was just out of high school a couple of years, and that was a stellar year for them. Unbelievable year they had that year. They started out 25-5. Duncan Campbell says, following Warren Buffett's advice about investing in index funds seems like the best advice. Yeah, Warren Buffett, very, very brilliant man, very smart man, very rich man, has said that in his mind, he doesn't gamble in stocks. He says, look, if I find a company I like and they're making money, I'll invest in them because they're making money. I'm not going to invest in them in the hopes that my investment goes up in value. I'm going to invest in them hoping that the company makes me money. And, you know, he's old school. He's old school. But he's also a billionaire. So, you know, he's got that going for him. Johnny Knoxville mentions Alan Trammell. Yeah, Alan Trammell, Lou Whitaker. Double play team at right up there. 84, you had your original hair back then. You know, it's hard to say. Toupee technology is obviously something that is just skyrocketing the last few years. Steve, what about sunshine laws? 10 years then, legislators reestablished with tweaks for the times. You know, that's an interesting point. There are people who point out that if you dig through the law books behind me, the blue ones, you'll find laws that are archaic, that'll literally say things like how long you can make the man who shovels coal on the train work before giving him a break. Okay? The law is still on the books. I'm sure it is. And you go, why is that law still there? And, well, no one's ever gone back and said, hey, we should just remove this law because now it's stupid. And the legislators are too busy doing other important things. Sorry. I know, it's a joke. I was joking. But one of the things is that there are good laws that you need to keep on the books. And so it can cut both ways. I did a story not too long ago about one of the states out west, maybe Idaho. I could be wrong about that, but one of the states out west where all of their laws actually need to be re-upped every single year because they wanted to do this, but they made it too far, like literally laws expiring after 1 year. And you know, if a law is good this year, it's probably good next year. But then times change, you know. So when steam locomotives are no longer the primary moving force on the ground in a state, then you can start looking at the laws regarding working conditions for the coal shoveler. So it's an interesting point. Silk Dog, are you religious? No, not terribly. I'll leave it at that. You buying gold or silver is better than the stock market. You know, it's an interesting point. I actually jokingly said that on the $100 challenge, I've got the $100 bill right there, that if somebody wanted silver in lieu of the $100, I'd be happy to pay it because I'm not going to pay it to either situation. But I like precious metals. Obviously, you can hold them. They got value. But, of course, they're at historic highs right now. So the question is, will they stay there or not? Downhill for life says, is it too late to start law school at 36? And you know, it's not. And I'll tell you right now that in my law school class was a woman in her 70s. And she graduated and passed the bar. And I was 29 when I entered law school. And I was average age. I had students who were older than me, students who were younger than me. And I can tell you right now that the traditional path where you go to college, get a degree, you're at 22, you graduate law school at 25, get a job, then a 25-year lawyer, that might be the traditional thing. But someone who's gone out and had a career, then goes to law school and uses their legal training and their career experience can often get a leg up and do very, very well as a lawyer. So I knew a guy, for instance, in law school who had spent years as a claims adjuster for a large insurance company. And then when he graduated law school, he had job offers being thrown at him by all kinds of insurance defense firms who go, we want somebody with experience working with insurance companies. And I also knew other people with medical backgrounds, for instance. And when I taught law school at the University of Detroit, I had a law student who was a surgeon. And he told me what he did, and I'm like, wouldn't going from a surgeon back to being an attorney be a step backwards? I mean, just think about the difference between, you know, when you're introduced to the party, this guy's a surgeon. No, this guy's a lawyer, you know. And he goes, but Steve, the problem with surgery is it requires extremely delicate hand movements. He goes, and as I get older, I could lose that. And the only thing I can do to leverage that knowledge that's in my head instead of just consulting would be to be a lawyer and doing legal stuff that worked into that. And it's actually not a bad idea. And he had the time and the inclination to do it. So, he did very, very well in law school, very, very bright man. And so if you want to go to law school later, I encourage you to do so. Just keep in mind that it's going to be at least 3 years, possibly 4 if you go at night. And it's a grind. It is not easy. This is not like you're going to be able to go and sit in a class and, watch somebody talk about basket weaving or something. Tons and tons of reading. So MT Cowboy points out that the $100 bill drops in value as well, Steve, and since it's paper, it continues to drop. Yeah, and of course, it's completely artificial. It's worth whatever we think it's worth. So I've had people say, Steve, that's an illusory promise to pay the $100 because of the fact that it's just paper money and has no value. If you've got a $100 bill you don't want, send it my way. We have a constitutional amendment banning the 1976 Winter Olympics, MHOA. Wouldn't surprise me, but I'll tell you right now that one of the most fascinating concepts involving the Olympics and law is the fact that the United States Olympic Committee got federal legislation protecting the word Olympics in America. And so in 1984, was that the LA Olympics in Los Angeles? When the Olympics were in Los Angeles, there's a major road in Los Angeles called Olympic Boulevard. And there were companies up and down Olympic Boulevard that had the name Olympic in their title, like, Olympic Transmission or Olympic Plumbing. And many of them got hit with cease and desist notices saying, you are infringing on a trademark owned by the U.S. Olympic Committee. You have to stop. And so I know that much hilarity and litigation ensued, but it was one of those things where it's like, wait a second, I don't get grandfathered in, because there were Olympics in Los Angeles, I think in the 1930s, 32 maybe. And so I suspect that many of those things go back that far, if not farther. I'm not sure about the history of Olympic Avenue in Los Angeles, but I remember reading about that going, that's just crazy. So what made you decide to become a lawyer, Roxanne? I've always been fascinated by the law, and research and writing also interests me. And a very good friend of mine, John Sedor, who lives in Alaska, and he is an attorney. He graduated law school, and one day he and I were talking about something, and he goes, why aren't you a lawyer? And I said, I don't know, law school, bar exam, a couple other things. I don't know why. And he said, you should be a lawyer. And I don't know why. Up until then, I never really thought about it. I never knew any attorneys. I know people. I know people who, like, my dad's an attorney, my brother's an attorney, my sister's an attorney, my uncle. I never knew any attorneys. I'd never talked to an attorney before. And now my best friend from high school goes, yeah, Steve, you should be a lawyer. And I'm like, really? And he goes, yeah, I think you'd be a good one. And because I think you'd do well in law school. And he had just gone through law school, so he'd know. And I said, huh. And it took about 24 hours to sink in. And I actually, at that moment in time, returned to my I didn't have an undergraduate degree yet. Returned to my undergrad, finished my undergrad, got a degree in history, applied to law school, got into law school. 2 years later, graduated with a law degree. Boom, I'm a lawyer. I called up John, said, hey, John, I'm a lawyer. He said, congratulations. So you never know. Someone can make a little comment to you someday and just say, have you thought about this? And you never know. It might make a difference. So, Steve, as an IT professional, I laugh or cringe at TV hacking portrayals. They are often so bad. Has this happened to you with how courts are shown, e.g. crime dramas? Answer, yes. We had a long discussion about TV shows last week, and I don't want to talk about them today. We've already settled the Marianne versus Ginger debate. But I don't watch the legal shows on TV. I've never seen Boston Legal. Is that what it's called? Never seen it. Never watched Ally McBeal. The last law show I watched with regularity was LA Law, and that's back when I was in law school. So the TV shows are so unreal, and it's obvious they don't even bring in somebody to consult who knows what they're doing, that it's just, I understand it's drama, it's entertainment, but it annoys the heck out of me, so I can't watch them. It's crazy. And I know that for many professions, movies do that. I'm sure that every stock car driver out there cringed watching Days of Thunder with Tom Cruise. So, Jay Pole says, lawyers make money. Somewhat. You got to scrap a little bit. There's a lot of competition, too. And then, of course, Lynn says, do you meet a lot of chicks because you're a lawyer? It's an interesting question, but not really. I mean, people tend to meet me or I meet them because they have a legal issue. And in fact, many people I meet for the first time over the phone. So, they call my office and, you can't really tell what, so I do meet lots of people. I'll say that. So that's good. Perry Mason. Yeah. Montana Cowboy mentions Perry Mason. I mentioned Perry Mason last week. And Perry Mason was a better show. I think they spent a little more time on the legalities of that. But, it was okay, but it still had its issues, though. So, for the limited times I've been to court, I found it to be exceedingly boring. Vic G. Join the club. Lawyers will tell you they find court boring also. And I can tell you right now that I've had clients, I've told the story before and I apologize, I've had clients say, Steve, I can't wait to get to court. And I just think to myself, oh, poor fool. You're going to get there and be bored like I am. And lawyers spend most of their time in court sitting around waiting, and our time is money. And I've had people say, like, wait, you're just sitting here and you're getting paid to sit here? I'm like, I'd rather be back in my office working. But, the court sets 50 things they got to hear one morning. And if you get called 50th, you get called at 5 minutes to 12, and you have to sit there from 8:30. So, you're just sitting there watching other people argue little things in front of the judge, or traffic tickets, or landlord-tenant matters, or whatever it might be. Rarely do you see fireworks in court. And the fireworks that you do see in court are the kind you see that are caught on camera because it's a high-profile trial. They've got cameras in there, and they've edited out the 30 seconds of excitement that happened in a 6-hour-long day of drudgery. So it's just a time sink. So it's boring. As a car guy, do you think electric vehicles are the future? Dan, thanks. I think they are. The question is whether they'll take over, and whether or not gasoline-powered cars will go away entirely or not. And it's not going to happen in the next 10 years, next 20 years. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw market share go from, EVs right now are like what, less than 1% or 1% or something like that. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see that start climbing to 10, 20, 30%. And even that would make a big difference, because imagine what happens when, for instance, 1/3 of the cars on the road don't need gasoline or oil, traditionally. So service stations, gas stations are going to start declining. Then the question is, what happens to the price of gas? Because on the one hand, demand will go down, but they might drop supply to meet it. So prices could stay steady. And it could be somewhere down the road that you have trouble finding fuel for your gasoline-powered car. Like I said, not in our lifetime, but I can see it, a generation or two down the road. It wouldn't surprise me. So, one of the funny things I mentioned before, and I'll throw this in here because I like to name drop, but I've been to Jay Leno's garage, and I've walked Jay Leno's garage with Jay, and he's shown me cars in his collection and answered questions. And I say, what about that car? What about that car? And in his car collection, he's got electric cars that are modern and electric cars from the 1910s, like 1905, 1910. He's got steam-powered cars from 1905, 1910, and I forgot what they burn, but they burn, it's not kerosene, but it's some other weird fluid that gets gasified and then run into the steam engine. And so these different technologies have been around, but it takes a while for one to take over. The electrics didn't catch on, but they had a little brief flirtation with success before the gasoline engines took over. And so I wonder what will happen to the guys who own the Ferrari GTOs 50 years from now, when there aren't gas stations on every corner. So talk about Lance Armstrong, the Seattle cyclist. Lance Armstrong it's such a sad story. Lance won a bunch of Tours de France. I watched every single one of them. I loved watching them. He was so dominant. And it was sad because there were rumors that he was doping. He fought the rumors very, very hard. And then finally, they came out and said, nah, we decided that he was doping. And then he later on basically came out and admitted it and said, yeah, I was doping. And by doping, I'm talking about taking banned substances to increase his performance. And the sad part about it is that I wouldn't be surprised if the people he's competing with were also doping, or at least many of them were. But rules are rules, and cycling's not quite like NASCAR, because NASCAR is not going to go back 3 years later and go, oh, we figured out that you cheated in that one race, we're going to take away that win. Cycling will do that to you. And so it's so sad because Lance Armstrong's story was so good. The guy had cancer. He survived, and then he came back and won all these tours. And I remember watching one Tour de France during a time trial where he was dominating, and they had a helicopter shot as his bike by himself was zigzagging through some small town in France, and somebody had taken white paint with like a roller and written on the pavement in letters 30 feet high that you could see from space, and said, Lance is God. And at that moment in time in cycling, he was. And to go from that to where he has to go on an Oprah Winfrey show and let her kick him around the room for an hour as he admits, yeah, I'm cheating, I'm sorry, I don't deserve any of these things, I'm a loser. And it's sad. It's just sad. And I don't, so that's my Lance Armstrong commentary. In the future, you have Amazon deliver your gasoline for your rare vintage gas car. And that very well could be true. Knowing me, I would. I've jokingly pointed out that I have no shame. I'll order anything off of Amazon. I don't care. I have no shame. Soap, belts, socks. I don't care. I need it. And if I can't get to the store today, I go, oh, Amazon Prime, I'll have it tomorrow. I don't care. And I order it. So I wouldn't be surprised if you do get your gas delivered at that moment in time. Jose Canseco did it too, Lisa points out. Yeah, unfortunately, there are several baseball players in America who, some of whom set records, probably should have their names with asterisks next to them in the record books. And it's just sad, but, what are you going to do? I've read articles about how they have changed the makeup of the baseball this year to make it livelier so that when you do hit it, it goes farther. And suddenly you got a spike in home runs. And there are guys, statistics freaks out there who study this stuff, and they go, hey, wait, something's happened causing all these home runs. So, it's kind of strange to play with the game like that. But, yeah, the guys in sports who do that, it's unfortunate because, especially baseball, it's an American thing that it's something so many children play and look up to the guys who play it. So, so are lawyer dogs that are lawyers? Are they humans that defend dogs that have committed dog crimes? All of the above. Diego wants to know about lawyer dogs, and of course that's a joke going back to the attorney who asked, to the defendant who asked the cop, I need a lawyer, dog. And they said that he was asking for a lawyer dog as opposed to a lawyer, dog, as dog is my friend or buddy. And since then, several people have passed me a link, and thank you for this, about the cat that is officially a lawyer in some law firm somewhere. But there was a stray cat that was adopted by a law firm, and the cat was wandering the halls of an office with the permission of most of the people there. And when someone complained and said, hey, who let that cat in? Rather than argue about it, they gave the cat a little name tag and a business placard and a tie and said, no, the cat works here. That's a lawyer cat. So we have confirmed a sighting of a lawyer cat, just not a lawyer dog. QA Library says, back in the day when there was no gas stations, you went to the drugstore or pharmacy to get your fuel. I wouldn't be surprised. I know there was a time when getting fuel for your car was considered to be about as difficult as figuring out where you're going to drive the thing, because there weren't good roads either. So you had to figure out all this stuff. I mean, think about this. Not only did you get your fuel from the pharmacy, but that's also where you got your, Coca-Cola. There was a time before they bottled Coke that you wanted to drink some Coke, you'd go up to the soda fountain at the local dime store and buy your Coke there. And then later on, somebody goes, hey, why don't we bottle this stuff and sell it? So Lynn says, are you a NASCAR fan? Not a big NASCAR fan. And it's largely because I was a huge fan of NASCAR back in the day. That's 1970 right there. Bobby Isaac won the national championship in 1970. And about 1975 or 6, it started getting a little weird for me because cars started getting away from looking stock. They were doing things to try to even the playing field. And to me, stock car racing shouldn't be about making all the cars look the same and go the same. It should be about, hey, let's take a car that's stock and race it. And that's what the guys did in the 1940s and 50s. So the earliest NASCAR races were guys who drove their cars to the track, raced them, and if they weren't too bent, drove them home. And nowadays, you go to the track, and every single car on the track is a $1 million work of art made by guys with computers and CAD and wind tunnels and spintrons. And the cars are not stock. They're all racing the same engines. They're all the same frames. And for the most part, the cars, you can't tell them apart unless someone tells you, oh, that by the way, that's supposed to be a Ford, or that's supposed to be a Toyota. And so, to me, stock car racing has gotten so far from being stock that if it's on, I'll watch for a few minutes. I respect what they do. The guys who do it are talented, but it doesn't have the same draw for me. There's a real every person feel about early stock car racing. By the way, and I often correct myself, I'm about to say something like, spokesman, I'll say spokesperson. Many people don't realize that in the first year of stock car racing, there were several women who raced. Several. Not one, several. I believe at least one race in the first year of NASCAR, there were 3 women in one field. So one of the most fascinating things to me about stock car racing back then is it was so democratized. That is, anybody can enter. That there were women who showed up and raced and were competitive. So it's just one of those weird little footnotes. I've looked a lot at the history of NASCAR, and that's one of the things that always struck me as an interesting thing about that. So, by the way, I just got a note from my moderator who points out that somebody has called attention to the title of this podcast. I put, Got Live If You Want It. And of course, that's a Rolling Stones album name from back in the day. Last week's was Live Baby Live, or Live Baby Live, which is an INXS album title. So I had to get something with the word live in the title, and as a call out to my days in radio, I figured I'd go with a musical reference. So the sponsors are in manufacturers' pockets in NASCAR. Yeah, and that's the thing to me, is that NASCAR now is a big business, and it is entirely all about the advertisers and the TV revenue and the sponsorship revenue, and the company that runs it, still family owned. They basically just look at it and go, yeah, next year we'll have this rule. They don't like next year, and it's like I said, it's not what it used to be. Montana Cowboy points out that Hitler's most cherished pilot was a woman, and that is true. The famous test pilot, she Hannah flew helicopters as well as a few other experimental airplanes back in World War II. So NASCAR has jumped the shark. The question is what year, though, they jumped the shark. I would say 1972 myself, but that's going way back. MHOH says, I hate LED brake lights and turn signals. So do I. And one of the most annoying things in cars these days, here we go, old man rants at clouds, is when a car is coming towards you and it hits a turn signal and the turn indicator blinks and that corresponding headlight turns off. I read someplace there's an explanation for it that makes sense, to make the turn signal more obvious. But now you've got only half your headlights on. And I remember the first time I saw it, I thought, wow, that guy's headlight went out. And then it went back on again. I'm like, was that on purpose? And of course, so there's a bunch of weird things they're doing to modern cars, and that's one of the things that bugs me. So I'm starting a podcast. Any suggestions for a first-timer? Justin. Yeah, Justin, I get asked that question from time to time. The key is to have something to talk about. And I'm not joking. I know a lot of people who say, I have a podcast, listen to it. And I've listened to them, and they come on, and they don't understand how hard it is to fill an hour of time or a half hour of time or however long your podcast is going to be. So my suggestion to you is, before you do a podcast, ask yourself, what am I going to talk about? And if you have a guest or a co-host, that helps. And avoid the trap of thinking that you're funny or thinking that your co-host is funny and laughing at your own jokes. Your best bet is to either come up with a list of things to talk about that you can talk about knowledgeably, or if you have a co-host, things you can talk about knowledgeably, and do a couple test runs and do them. And keep in mind that the goal is that you want to be talking about something where people are going to be listening going, hey, that sounds interesting. I'm going to listen to that, okay? They're not going to tune in because they like you or think you're funny. They're going to tune in because they like what you're talking about. Content is king. So here's a question. We just hit the 1 hour mark, but I've got no place to go. So if it's okay for you, I'll stick around for a few more minutes, okay? Because somebody else pointed out that the hour is up. Ghostwriter pointed it out. So I'll stick around for a few more minutes. And we're also only at 346 people on the live YouTube feed. I kind of hope they get that a little higher. So states are legalizing marijuana just to collect taxes, just like cigarettes. Jeopardy 4100. Oh, absolutely. That's one of the ways you can get something legalized. And this is a note to people who haven't figured this out yet. If there's something out there that's illegal, find a way the government can tax it. And then talk to some politicians about that. And they'll go, wait a second. And by the way, for those of you who are not familiar with the history of Prohibition, okay, Prohibition was when the federal government outlawed the manufacture and sale of alcohol in America, okay? And it went over very, very poorly. And there's debates about this. But one of the primary drivers to end Prohibition was when the government realized that people were going to keep drinking. But the only difference was the money was going to the mob and not to legitimate corporations that could be taxed. So somebody said, maybe we should legalize it and tax it. So that's what they did. So they ended Prohibition, I believe, largely so they could just shift who was getting the money. We don't want Al Capone getting the money. We want the IRS getting the money. So, are the Browns winning? I don't know. I'm sure somebody does. The Penniless Dreamer says, I started a YouTube channel partly because of you. Oh, okay. I hope it's not a channel where you just attack me every time you make a video. What's funny is I started this channel about 5 years ago and put up one video. I waited a little while. I put up a second video. And at the end of the first, I think it was the first year, I had 12 subscribers. So the funny thing is that it takes a little while to build them up, but I was also not trying very hard at the beginning. So if you start a YouTube channel, like I said, just keep plugging away. Steve would love to see more adventures on the rivers. John, hey, thank you. I'm going to. I take my canoe out from time to time. Unfortunately, the weather is going to end now. In fact, the canoe's probably put away for the rest of the year. I don't think that I'll be able to take it out again this year, but next year I'll take it out a few times. And every time I take it out, I do film it and I upload the film. So just look at my page for any of the videos that have a thumbnail that looks outdoors, because that's it. So if found in contempt of court, are there any lasting repercussions? Stephen. Well, contempt of court depends on the level, but there's different levels of criminal contempt of court. And so a judge could treat contempt of court like a misdemeanor. And so it could go on your record like any other misdemeanor if that's possible in your state. But most of the contempts of court I've heard about are the type where the judge slaps somebody, fines them, and just basically says, go take a timeout for a few minutes and then come back in here and it'll go away. But yeah, I'm not sure. I suspect it varies wildly from state to state. Jim Bergen, I've been binge watching you for the past 2 days since I first found you. Now I'm hooked. Thank you. I actually got a note from a guy the other day who said, Steve, I recently watched all of your videos. When will you post some more? And I said, you've watched all 800? And he said, 800? Really? I said, yeah. I'm not proud, but I put up 2 a day, and I started that last year. So whatever day of the year this is, multiply that times 2, and that's how many videos have gone up this year. But I put up a lot of videos the year before and the year before. So there's a lot of videos there. So there's 800 videos. It would take you a while to go through all of them. Some of them are longer, some of them are shorter. I try not to make them shorter than 8 or 9 minutes, and I try not to make them longer than 20 minutes or so. my camera has an issue at 20 minutes. But I have done a couple that have gone over on purpose, and I knew that for the most part, 14, 15 minutes long. So Andreas says they do that here in Canada with marijuana, but inefficiently. Only the government can sell it. They're doing a lousy job. So people are still buying it off the street, according to studies and surveys. And of course, I'm glad you pointed it out. That's always a weird situation. In Michigan, for instance, liquor is not sold generally through distributors. Liquor is sold by the state of Michigan. And apparently, I don't know if that goes back to Prohibition or where it came from, but I know that a long time ago, Michigan basically said, look, we don't want anybody selling liquor without paying us our taxes. So we'll sell it. So if you own a party store, as we call it here, or an alcohol store or a bar where you need liquor, you buy it from the state of Michigan. You buy your beer from a distributor, but you buy your liquor from the state. So weird situation. But again, like I said, they do that, I assume, because they wanted to make sure people weren't fudging on the taxes of it. So Don Matzeder says that he watched all my videos over a period of several weeks, but he's retired. I'm so glad you found something useful to do with your golden years. Joking. One of the funny things, and I'll have to tell you this, is I've had people say, Steve, have you ever done a video on, and they'll name something. And quite often, it is something I've done a video on. And so just as a note to you guys, it'll save you some time, because I do try to answer emails, but I can't get to them all because I get hundreds of emails a day now, is if you're curious to know if I did a video on curb stoning, for instance, type into the Google search box or the YouTube search box, Lehto curb stoning, and you'll find the video I did on it. And you'll probably also find, if you did it at Google, you'll find the articles I wrote about it for Road and Track and Jalopnik. But that's the best way to do that. Scrolling through all 800 videos will take you a couple minutes. So try fingers. Dr. Demento every Saturday morning. Yeah, Dr. Demento was a classic radio host who specialized in playing really weird music, offbeat music, unknown stuff. And I believe he's credited, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he's credited with discovering Weird Al Yankovic. I believe Weird Al wrote him a letter and enclosed a tape. And I think it was his version of Another One Rides the Bus, which was, Another One Bites the Dust. And when Dr. Demento played it and generated some attention from it, it helped Weird Al get a record contract. I could be wrong about that, but I seem to recall there's some connection between Dr. Demento and Weird Al. And J. Paul says, did you ever listen to him? Yeah, he was on the air in Detroit for a while. He was syndicated. I forgot which station, maybe WRAF or something. But Jeopardy 4100, got to go. Thanks for brightening my morning. Hey, thanks for checking in. And like I said, we'll go a few more minutes here. I'm going to try to do these every weekend at some preset time. Try to do them on Sundays, but I'll give you a heads up right now. Next week, Westwood One, I'm sure, was the syndicator of it. In that case, it probably was WRIF in Detroit. And Lynn, I'll answer your question in a second. But next week is the Free Press Marathon on Sunday, so my Sunday's shot. I'll try to do the live feed on Saturday next week. So I'll be competing with college football, not pro football. But I'll send up some notices on that, try to remind you of that. But pretty soon down the road, I'll try to make them a regular feature on Sundays. Lynn H. asks, what is my favorite band? I have many favorite bands because I love music, and I used to work in radio, so I know a lot about music. But my current favorite band is a band out of Texas called Blue October, and I've seen them twice in concert recently. I'm going to see them again a couple weeks here in October, ironically. And if you're unfamiliar with them, look them up on YouTube. Favorite song, She's My Ride Home, or possibly Hate Me, or maybe even I Want It. But anyways, check them out. They're fabulous. They're great live. I'm one of these guys where if a band doesn't have 10 or 15 songs I like, I don't want to go see them live because I haven't got the kind of attention span to sit through all the stuff I don't like. These are guys where I actually like the entire experience of the concert, and I leave going, wow, I wish it played longer. So Blue October, check them out. Justin Furstenfeld's the lead singer and songwriter, and he's a fabulous performer. So Sam says Love is Blue, not October. Sam, if you're on the phone right now, I'd stump you and go, but who performed the song Love is Blue? Because I know. Having worked at oldies stations back when, Andreas, you know, the song Hate Me? I worked at an oldies station, and we had to play stuff like Love is Blue. Back in the day when an instrumental like that could actually make the charts. Imagine that. Montana Cowboy says, I heard that Al Jolson was your favorite. Yeah, unfortunately, Al's a little bit before my time. I didn't have a big wax cylinder collection. I started getting records back in the late 60s, shall we say. So, hey, Ann calls it Paul Moriat. There you go. Love is Blue. Sean says Iron Maiden is still number one. Yeah. Gotta love the heavy metal. And Caduceus says, I like Red October. You mean The Hunt for Red October? It's a great movie. I have not read the book, but I've seen the movie. So, Richard says he recently had a chance to meet Dr. Demento at a celebrity show. He's a really nice guy. You know, I've heard interviews with him. He seems like a really nice guy. And that's the cool thing. You know, the guy found a niche and made it work. So, you know, great guy. The best car song. That's a tough one, you know. John, do you remember CKLW? Of course I do. I grew up when CKLW was the number one station in Detroit, Toledo, Flint, and Windsor, where it was from. CKLW is a Canadian radio station at 800 on the AM dial. They called themselves the Big 8. And they were one of the first top 40 stations to follow a good top 40 format. They weren't the first, but they were one of the first. And they had a clear signal that covered a huge portion of the Midwest. And as a result of their format and their signal, they dominated. They had huge contests. They had great disc jockeys. They played wonderful music. They broke a lot of acts. They were the first people to play a lot of, you know, big time acts. And they were at the tail end of when AM radio was still relevant. They were probably the last great AM radio station to play music in the Midwest. And so I remember them like it was yesterday. And, you know, Byron McGregor in 2020 News and listening to them on the drive into school. I mean, they were, I don't know what their market share was, but it had to be spectacular. Nowadays, when a station can be number one with a 5 or 6 share, I bet these guys had a 20 or 30 share at least. So, yeah, they were huge. So, 409 is good, Cyrena points out. Thank you, Cyrena, for pointing that out. 409 is a good song. Of course, a little dated because, of course, the Chevy 409 was an earlier generation of the race engines. The Beach Boys, I always liked the Beach Boys a lot. I saw them in concert many, many times back in the old days. And, of course, the other song that the Beach Boys are known for, the disc jockeys all know, is a song called Little Deuce Coupe. And the reason we know that song is it's less than 2 minutes long. And so what happens is if you're a disc jockey and you're trying to back time to the top of the hour, like the news starts exactly at the top of the hour, and you have a song ending and you've got less than 2 minutes, you could either talk for a minute and a half or jam in Little Deuce Coupe. And so a lot of disc jockeys would keep Little Deuce Coupe in the studio in case they had time trouble. And anytime, I'm giving away secrets here from radio, anytime you're listening to a live disc jockey and you hear him play Little Deuce Coupe right before a hard segment like Network News, he's playing it because he had a minute and a half to kill. And that's the only song in the studio that fits that bill. So there you go. I remember Mott and Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show. Now, Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show, you struck a chord with me there. Because Dr. Hook, of course, did the song Sylvia's Mother, which is one of the greatest songs of all time. Don't argue that. But there are people out there who hate that song. But Sylvia's Mother is a great song. And I'll tell you something else. Sylvia's Mother is a true story. And the song was written by Shel Silverstein, who wrote 3 songs, all of which you've heard, which were all hits by different people. So he wrote Sylvia's Mother, A Boy Named Sue, and he also wrote the Unicorn Song. So he wrote those 3 songs. They're all wonderful songs, huge hits, but of course Shel Silverstein's better known as a children's author who wrote things like Where the Sidewalk Ends. But he wrote Sylvia's Mother because he had an experience in his life where he went to look up an old girlfriend whose name was Sylvia, called her house, And the mom actually said, Sylvia is getting married. I'm not going to let you talk to her. And Shell said, I want to talk to her, please. I just want to talk. And she goes, no. Hangs up on him. Now, he could have driven to her house and done what you do in a romantic comedy and try to break up the wedding, but instead he wrote a song about her, and the song is called Sylvia's Mother. Now, in the song, he doesn't say the correct last name, because he says, please, Mrs. Avery, I just have to talk to her. But in real life, the woman's name was Sylvia Pandolfini, and that is a true story. I'm not making it up. Go check Wikipedia. It's true. That's what you get for hitting a DJ with a little bit too much energy on a Sunday afternoon. Another one, Bites the Dust by Queen. There you go. John Gendron says he saw Dr. Hook in Wayne, Michigan. Yeah, it's funny. I don't remember ever hearing of Dr. Hook touring, but I know if you go on YouTube, you can find videos of him performing live. So I know that the band did go out and perform. I'm just not sure if they're still around. Oh, Michael Hagbert asked, what's with the sinking ship? The rudder doesn't look like the Titanic. That's a good point. I can do this because we're live. But this is a bank. And the bank was made by an artisan in Michigan who makes metal sculptures. And I found this at a gift shop up in Traverse City, Michigan. You may have seen me wear a red shirt that's got a diagram on the front that says Michigan Asylum on the front. And the asylum is a building in Traverse City that got restored. It's no longer an asylum. And they have gift shops and so on there. And I found this there. And I was so struck at what a cool thing it was. The guy had other stuff too. But it is supposed to be the Titanic, I think. But of course, the rudder is wrong and the number of screws is wrong. But let's not get picky, okay? It's a children's bank. But it's heavy. And it's got some heft to it, so I like that. But I get asked about that from time to time. If you're interested in this, I forgot the guy's name. It might be Scott. If you're wrong. But if you simply Google the phrase Titanic Michigan Bank, you'll find a page that has those on there. So I would encourage you to do that because the guy's work is amazing. And that's just simply one of the many designs he has. Jack Summers says, if it's in Wikipedia, it must be true. Yes and no. And I'll tell you right now, there are 2 pages on Wikipedia that I tried contributing to. One about the Italian Hall disaster, which is commemorated by that little block of wood. And I've written books on the Italian Hall disaster. But whenever I go in there and I make changes, someone goes back in and corrects me, even though I'm right. And then there's a page about the Chrysler Turbine Car. And somebody, not me, but somebody went in and updated the page with dozens and dozens and dozens of corrections and cited me. It actually says, see Steve Lehto's, Detroit's Coolest Creation, Chrysler Turbine Car book, page such and such. So the Turbine Car page, I'd encourage you to go read it because it's correct. It's based on my writing. I didn't write it, but someone who read my book did. But as for the other stuff on Wikipedia, I like to go there, but also look to see where the sources are if they're cited. But the Sylvia's Mother story, I've seen in other places. I'm pretty certain that it's there. So Paul Magliano says, you lay heft in your piggy banks, but not your credit cards. Exactly. The point is that a heavy piggy bank is harder to steal. But my credit cards are my wallet, and I don't want extra weight dragging me down as I go about my busy life with my credit cards. So Cyrena says, I tried to fix some things on Wiki, and they called my corrections graffiti. Well, that's the problem. And one of the interesting things about Wikipedia is they claim to be all, crowdsourced and democratic and, this, that. No, there are people who are fanatics about Wikipedia, and they get very, very possessive of what they have on there, very proprietary, and they act like they own it. And I've actually had a situation where I got into a fact battle with somebody where I corrected something, made it correct, and they corrected it and made it incorrect. And I corrected it, and after we'd done that 2 or 3 times, they actually issued a warning and said, stop that. So I stopped, and then it got switched back to the incorrect thing. So, yeah, Wikipedia has its faults, but it has its value as well. The bank is not available at the moment, according to John Doe. Really? That's too bad. Because I've sent people to the page, and I saw it was available when I was there, but item is no longer available. But the guy who makes them is still around. I suspect he just simply needs to make another batch. I wouldn't be surprised if all the people I've sent him is actually causing a shortage of those banks. I'll take credit for it. Somebody asked, Chrysler Turbine Car was an actual full working model 1965. No, 1963. So the Chrysler Turbine Car is this car right here. And I've also got a model still in the box of the Chrysler Turbine Car. Chrysler built a fleet of these in 1963, put them on the road for a couple of years. They built 55 of them. 46 of them were later destroyed. 9 of them still exist. Jay Leno's got one. Chrysler's got 2. The Smithsonian's got one. The St. Louis Museum of Transportation's got one. There's one in California at the Natural History Museum, and I may have missed one there, but there's 9 that still exist. A few of them still drive. There's another privately owned one in Indiana. I know the owner of that car, but the one Jay Leno's got, I've actually driven. I like to throw that in from time to time. But yeah, it's a very, very cool car, and it would run on any liquid that burned. So gasoline, alcohol, tequila, Chanel No. 5, you name it. If it burned, it would run on it. Donald Norby, I collect Jags. I assume you mean Jaguars. That means you have too much money, way too much money. And by the way, you're obviously a very tolerant fellow. Kilroy, do all those microphones work? Which one is the oldest? They do not all work, but many of them have really weird adapters and cords on them. So somebody said, why don't you hook a few up and play with them? And I looked at them, and some have got like 3 prongs, some have got 4 prongs, some of them have got like, 2 prongs and a flat thing. And so I couldn't plug them into my device. So they don't work that way. The oldest microphone is this ribbon microphone right there. And that's a ribbon microphone. It's very old. The coolest microphone is probably the Shure that's directly over my head. That's a common microphone. You'll see it everywhere from old movies broadcasting to singers. Elvis Presley's often featured singing into one. It's just a very, very cool, iconic shape. That's a Shure microphone. I just collect the microphones. Those are not all broadcast microphones. How did I get to meet Jay Leno? Very, very complicated story. But when I wrote the manuscript for the Turbine Car book, I sent a copy to him, and he read it, and he called me. And it just turns out he's a heck of a nice guy. And he's written the forwards to 2 of my books. He wrote the forward to the Turbine Car book and the forward to my Tucker book. So very, very nice guy. Very, very cool car collection. And I mentioned that before. So, do you recall the 1968 Camaro with the 302 Rat engine? I was never a big Camaro guy. I had an older brother who had a Camaro 1970 that had a big block in it, and the thing was fast. There's always the fight about which is better for the street, a big block or a small block, when they're both available in a small car like that. And depends on what you want. You want to stomp on the gas and watch smoke come out the back end, or do you want to be able to zip around curves and stuff? So only in America do you take a monstrous engine and shoehorn it into something like that. So Shure mics are good. Yes, they are. And people often put it the Silver Eagle mic, which is the round one right here. It's often called a lollipop, a D108, I believe it is. Was often used by guys who did ham radio or CB radio. So what is the book you're working on right now, Jim? I'm actually working on a couple of things, but one of them is a memoir about a failed canoe trip, which is harder to explain than it sounds. So I'll talk more about it as the project progresses. The D104. I might have said the number wrong. Is the lollipop behind the Ferrari? So it's a very iconic microphone. I had to have it for the collection simply to make it look like that. Sam Sen, who's the Jag guy, says he loves Jay Leno's white 54 Jag XK120. Is that the one he bought from the older person? I know he's gotten some where somebody contacts him, look, I've got a car, it's very unusual, I simply want you to have it. And they work out a deal with him. And I remember seeing a Jay Leno's garage about a white Jaguar. That might be the one we're talking about here. Yeah, Jim says the failed canoe trip a comedy. Yes, it is. It's funny now. It wasn't funny then. So, Sam, you are good. Is that the story? I'm just wondering if that's the story or not. So, well, the Imperial story that Jay tells is the same kind of a story. Jay's got a gold Imperial, this huge boat of a car. And I remember walking through his garage looking at it going, it's a neat car, but it's like right next to like some exotic foreign car. And he goes, oh, but Steve, the guy who owned this car liked this car so much that he bought like replacement parts for every single piece of it. And I forgot it was him or somebody who got it when the guy died, but they basically said, we want to get rid of it now, and you're the only person who will appreciate it. So they gave him this car with all these parts. And that's the crazy thing. And so I know that if you check out Jay Leno's garage, and I encourage you to do so on YouTube, he's got stories on there about, crazy stories. People brought some car, it's one of a kind, or it's something that survived. And you're like, and I know that like one of them, when I was walking through his garage, was an old Mercedes that had been sitting in a storage unit in Arizona for like 30 years. And it had like, rotors frozen solid. And they said, it's worth something, but we don't know who besides you would actually invest the effort in fixing it. And Jay got it and took it back to the shop, tore it apart, put it together, and it looks brand new now. It runs and drives. So it's some of the stuff in his collection it's not just the car. It's the story that goes with the car and how it came to him and why he appreciates it. And I'll tell you the story that when I was out visiting him at his garage, he offered to take me for a ride in his steam car. He has a steam car. He's got a couple of them. And we pushed this thing out. I helped push it out. And he goes, yeah, to get it running, we have to do a bunch of things. And he climbs underneath it. I took a picture of it. It was so funny. I took a picture of it because Jay Leno is laying on his back underneath the steam car messing with something. And I turned to one of his employees and I go, why aren't you doing that? Like, I just assumed if you work for the guy, you'd be the one who climbs underneath there. And he goes, no, Jay likes doing this. And Jay was down there making sure the plumbing was right, and he's lighting the pilot light. But you've got to do that with your steam car. And so every one of these cars he's got, many of them got these extremely exotic and bizarre things you have to remember, like how to start your steam car. You have to climb underneath it and turn knobs and light a fire. Some other car, it's like, oh, the accelerator's up here on the column. Oh, by the way, to get this thing to go, you've got to turn this thing over here. I mean, and keeping all this stuff straight is insane. A lot of older cars have got levers and knobs that aren't marked. And so there's just like 3 levers next to the driver, and it's like, oh yeah, one of those is the throttle, the other one's the brake, whatever. I'm making stuff up here, but that's it. And he's got all this in his head, along with all the cars, and he loves them all. So it's an experience. So it's pretty cool. Wild Bill, love the idea of a steam car. Yeah, there have been companies that have made them. I did a video. If you check my other videos, you'll find a video I did about the Chevelle, the steam Chevelle. I met a guy with a huge collection of steam cars in Michigan, and he let me walk around his Chevelle and shoot some video. So that was a lot of fun. It wasn't terribly practical, but it was an experiment that General Motors did. They actually paid someone else to do this, but now the car still exists, and this guy got the car. It's pretty cool. So, ever get caught up in the car auctions on TV? Gregory, good question. I love watching both Barrett-Jackson and the Mecum auctions. Although Mecum, because they allow some stranger stuff, has stuff in their auctions that once in a while I'm like, whoa. It'll be like, yeah, this is a 32 Ford pickup, and some guy put a turbocharged Hemi into it. We don't know why. It's got an automatic transmission, and the entire dashboard looks like it came out of the Starship Enterprise. And you're like, what? Huh? And I mean, at least Barrett-Jackson tries to keep vehicles that are generally original or stock or collectible, and even the ones that are custom aren't that weird. But Mecum, once in a while, they'll go like, yeah, this is just a 1973 Trans Am with 12,000 miles on it, untouched, rolled across the block. And you're like, wow, that's cool. But then, like I said, 5 minutes later, there's some 3-wheeled thing with a Sikorsky helicopter engine in it, and Who knows? I'm like, what is this? So I like the Mecum auctions, though, because they're the ones who had a Dodge Daytona, similar to this one here, but as a street version, that crossed the block for almost $1 million a few years ago. $1 million for a car that cost brand new about $4,000. So, and Al, love the car auctions. Yeah. Does Jay have a Daewoo Lanos? I don't think so, because if he did, I'd owe him a book. There's a standing joke on my channel that the Daewoo Lanos, they may have built a few, but I've never seen one on the road. Now, people have pointed out to me that they see them occasionally on the road, and I said, well, if anybody in my audience can ever get me the registration of one, proving that one is plated and on the road right now, Xerox it, fax to me, email to me, I'll send you a free book. So far, no takers. That was a few years ago. Most aftermarket engines manufactured are generally based on GM's 454, unless, of course, we're talking about drag racers, when you have them based off the Hemi. I believe the Hemi is also widely used in aftermarket motors. So I see we're hitting the 130 mark. So I'm going to have to probably bail out right about now. I saw about 90% Big Three cars while in Michigan, about 20% BMW and Greenville Spartanburg, since the BMW plant is in Greenville. Yeah. Big Three still have a huge market share here in Michigan. And Mike the Mechanic says they are alive today as the Chevy Aveo. Yeah, but that doesn't count, because the Chevy Aveo would have the Chevy infrastructure behind it, whereas the Daewoo Lanos, I don't even know what Daewoo's infrastructure was, or if they even had an infrastructure, let alone a structure. So here's what we're going to do. I got to wrap it up now. We've been on for an hour and a half. I can't imagine that we're going to make much more progress today. So next week will be Saturday in the afternoon, 1 or 2 o'clock. I'll make an announcement somewhere along the line. Watch the videos. I always put a plug in at the end. And I thank you all for watching and listening. And if you didn't catch all of this, the video will get archived back in the video stream as a video simply available on my channel. But thank you for your time and attention, and I appreciate every one of you. We'll talk again next week. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.